2024 meeting. Also move to approve as
Second.
all in favor. We now have new business, consideration of a resolution authorizing the execution of standardized stormwater agreements for Broad Creek Landing, Paddocks on Jarvis Creek, Rebo Island, and Victoria Square. Welcome, Mr. Netzinger. How are you this morning?
Good morning. Great. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present. So you have in your packet a staff memo, staff report, and a resolution, draft resolution, and I will turn on my mic. Zendaya, thank you. There is an exhibit I'd like to just kind of have up on the screen as we talk. So the background on this is that between starting in 2007 through 2012, the town entered into drainage agreements with the larger PUDs on the island. A total of 11 agreements came into place. That was something that council had desired to do because they realized that more than 70% of the residents in the island lived in the private communities, largely represented by these larger PUDs, and they all pay a stormwater fee on the annual tax bill, as do all residents of the island that own property. And so that all went well and good, and now the town, per the terms and conditions of the drainage agreement, provide corrective maintenance services via the agreement inside the communities for deficiencies that would qualify for service. There's a little bit of a misconception that tends to leak out from time to time, that people think that the town has taken over ownership of the drainage systems in these private communities, but that is indeed not the case. We just provide kind of a value-added boost to help them by fixing deficiencies when they occur based on a ranking of priority score. So when we have deficiencies outside the community and our primary areas of responsibility, we rank all of those when a deficiency comes in, and we provide service via our corrective maintenance program to fix those deficiencies. And we rank and sort those and prioritize those and budget those based always on their priority score, whether they occur inside a community with a drainage agreement or in the town proper. After a few years there, a smaller community, Bermuda Point specifically, kind of said, hey, these larger communities have these drainage agreements. They have platted shared rights of way within the community and single family lot ownership. We're also a private community with a platted communal right of way that's within the community that provides, a communal benefit. So why can't we also qualify for an agreement? And that was kind of brought before council, and they agreed that at the time that probably made sense. So in 2001, Bermuda Point, along with 5 other smaller communities, applied for and were entered into agreements with the town. So we added 6. So we went from 11 drainage agreement partners to 17. In 2023, we had 5 more applicants, 5 more communities that asked if they could be entered into an agreement with the town. And those were accepted in 2023. In 2024, we now have 4 more. Those are Broad Creek Landing, Paddocks on Jarvis Creek, Rebo Island, and Victoria Square. So the map the exhibit you see here shows in yellow the drainage agreement partners, the 22 that exist currently. And in that purple, the 4 communities that are currently asking for drainage agreements with the town. The terms and conditions of the drainage agreements were standardized in 2020 so that when a new agreement is entered into, they're all provided the exact same level of service. And the same criteria are applied to determine whether or not deficiency within a community would qualify to be corrected by the town. So when we get a new agreement, we go in and check their drainage inventory and try and determine what would probably qualify for service. Again, qualification is based specifically on the terms and conditions of the agreement. And the theme is that the only infrastructure that we do take care of is the infrastructure that drains the platted rights of way. It's not a wholesale taking care of every golf course parking lot or common space by a pool or anything like that. It's just the right of way that provides that mutual communal benefit to the residents. So if water falls on part of a roadway and it's drained through a drainage system, we will chase that all the way to its outfall or when it leaves the community. And that's the basic skeleton of the qualifying portions of the drainage system. So today we have these, like I said, these 4 new applicants, and we're asking you to consider resolution to accept these 4 new agreements.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments? I'll start with you, Councilman Stanford.
Thank you. Thank you. Jeff, it's a nice report. Obviously, there's been a lot of work that's gone into creating these standard agreements. I remember that from back in 2020. And then some pushback. People wanted to have special provisions, and we said, no, it has to be standardized, and that evolved correctly. If if a community here, a PUD here, was not under agreement and needed some help with a drainage system that was in a right-of-way, would the town come in and help? Or they would say, no, you got to have a drainage agreement first?
And so each one of the drainage agreements is supported also by an easement. This easement, the easement document is one of the 2 documents that every drainage agreement involves, because we can't provide the service without that legal right to do so. So there's an easement and a drainage agreement. The drainage agreement relies on the easement being signed. These the easements are not permanent drainage agreements. They could be canceled at either time by either party. The same with the drainage agreement.
So
we could not, I'm sorry.
The community did not grant an easement and enter into an agreement, the town would say, no, we can't do it.
Yeah, we could not provide that service without the easement.
Okay, that makes sense, and it looks like this is the right thing to do for the large communities as well as the smaller ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ames.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Jeff.
Morning.
You and I have had extensive conversations around this matter. It's, I think, known to some that I have issues with these agreements, largely because of the comprehensiveness of the agreements. But I'll get to that in a second. What is the fund balance today in the storm drainage system?
The fund balance for the stormwater utility?
Yeah.
I would have to ask Adriana for a specific number, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million or slightly less.
And thank you very much.
How much? 13.
Oh, getting even better and better.
You want to ask again?
Yeah. Is there a priority given to capital improvements as opposed to maintenance?
So the stormwater utility has a separate component of the budget that is transferred to the capital improvements program that is determined by our need for capital improvements that are identified. How the corrective maintenance program, which is the program that supports providing service, correcting deficiencies, is a separate component of the budget. And we determine on an annual basis when we're developing the budget, based on the amount of funding we have available. And again, in the past, we've been kind of trying to match up the annual budget with the annual revenue produced by the stormwater fee. So after we take out the other programs that are required, whatever we need to spend on CIP projects, whatever we need to spend on pump station maintenance, our stormwater water quality monitoring program, routine maintenance in the town proper, all of those things are taken down, and what we have left is the pot that we would use for identifying what we can do with corrective maintenance.
Let me ask.
So the other two factors that are involved in that are our staff capacity to deliver those services. And also, in some cases, the contractor capacity of the contractors that we have. You know, we do all this work with contractors. We don't have public works staff that does this directly. So sometimes the limiting factor is the contractor capacity as well. And that's how we determine the project list.
Are the
annually.
stormwater, systems outside of the PUDs as effective and, advanced as those inside the PUDs?
So when you're talking about the responsibility of the town maintaining the infrastructure, the stormwater infrastructure, that would consist of the stormwater infrastructure that's in the town-owned right-of-ways and the drainage system outfalls that drain those roads, and then any other particular easements that have acquired that typically, in some cases, would drain another public road, a county-owned or a state-owned road.
Yes,
But by and large, our obligation on town-owned infrastructure is relatively small compared to what we have per the drainage agreements as an additional liability, as if you might put it that way.
Yeah, I'm noting that there is a issue of our need to improve drainage outside of the PUDs as a priority, but that's complicated by the county and SCDOT ownership of roads. All right, it seems to me that there are two choices in front of us. We have the choice of raising fees to accelerate the effectiveness of the demands or the requests by the PUDs. That would require us to add personnel and probably become a different kind of animal than we are operating today, or ranking critically the elements of the system within the PUDs so that the PUDs take responsibility for those that are less critical and holding down the demands placed on the town system. Those to me are the two choices we have going forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Stafford.
A couple of questions. What parts, if any, of the island are not currently covered either by town primary responsibility or by drainage agreements? I can't quite tell by looking at this map if there are areas that are not either the town's responsibility or private drainage agreements.
So yes, that's actually an improvement that we're going to make to this exhibit when we come before you in October as part of a workshop, is to show also when we talk about outside the private communities, the footprints are a little bit misleading when we're showing our area of primary responsibility, because that's not exactly true per the exhibit. The original intent was to show, this exhibit has been used over and over again and modified as we added agreements, but it's showing what's not been added or what's public. But most of the roads in the town belong to either the state or the county. So if we were to call out just what's the responsibility of the town, that's a modification we can do that would maybe better represent our much more limited area of responsibility.
And if I could jump, Jeff shared information with me last week. So there's 4 other communities that are interested for agreements, and 28 beyond that currently could be eligible to apply. So that's, what was that, 32 more beyond these. But even if they were all added, it increases our area of responsibility by about 1%.
When it comes to the amount of infrastructure additional infrastructure we would take responsibility for via providing corrective maintenance services, it would add about 1 to 1.5% to what we currently have responsibility for via the agreements.
And one other bit of information I'll share, again, learning a lot more about the criteria and ranking and the number of projects, are that a lot of the smaller partners with these drainage agreements. Their infrastructure from a corrective maintenance standpoint, a lot of the projects will have an inability to fund based on the amount of money in each year's budget. So a lot of the small projects would be very difficult to execute under the current arrangement with limitations on funding, staffing resources, and then also contractor availability. Because I know some have asked if these communities could execute the work themselves, would they be reimbursed? And it's subject to funding availability in these agreements, which says they may never get the funding. But just adding more money to that pot would draw down our fund reserve for all these smaller projects. And Councilman Ames, to your question, most of the larger communities have more sophisticated infrastructure and they have the teams to maintain their systems and often handle most of the small to medium-sized stuff and don't even bother to contact us unless it's a large item that would rank higher in our criteria. So I just wanted to share that.
Don't go too far, Sean, because I've got some follow-ups on what you said after Mr. Alfred finishes. Thank you.
I would add to what Sean just said that per the terms and conditions of the agreement, there is no, it says specifically in the agreement that, funding is not guaranteed because it is always based on the funding that we have available. And that's one of the challenges there. Again, a lot of the things about prioritizing projects, it's built into whether or not it's a primary system or a secondary system, or perhaps something tertiary like an individual inlet at the end of a cul-de-sac. So that all factors in. It has a major impact on how when we evaluate a deficiency as to what's being served by the drainage system at that local location, and whether or not it's a safety concern or it's just the fact that the infrastructure is failing is causing a threat because it's not functional. But all that sort of stuff is baked into our prioritization process.
Can I follow up on that line aspect a little bit? What do you do in a situation where you have in a PUD a major problem with, say, in excess of $1 million expenditure required? If I recall correctly, your annual budget's around $5 million. Is that right?
The total budget for the utility, based on revenue coming in, is roughly $5.5 million per year is what we bring in. That supports staff and all the other things we do as well.
So if you find an emergency situation with large dollar requests and not enough in the $5.5 million left to do it, what happens?
Outside of the expenses that we have, we incur maintaining the pump station. We haven't hit one that big yet, $1 million hit in a private community. But if we had, it would depend on the priority and the risk associated with the project. It would have to score on our 1 to 20 scale. That's how we score all of these things. And so it would depend on how severe it is. Usually if there's a high priority deficiency, we would go in, an extraordinarily high priority deficiency, something, currently we have about 200 qualifying requests across the whole width of the town of deficiencies that have been brought to our attention. Of those, we're taking care of the ones that are 10 or higher. If you're looking at a bell curve of the deficiencies based on the priority score, it would peak around 8 or 9. So when we have those higher priority ones, we would take those and evaluate them and take care of them as necessary.
I'm going to help Jeff with some of this too. So you will hear from Adriana in a few minutes with her monthly update. You also know that in October, first reading budget amendment, as we roll forward funds from prior year, right? Those items under contract, those capital projects that are under contract, we move forward those dollars. Should there be, and there is actually, should there be an emergency, $1 million, $500,000, a pump in Lawton Station, a pump in Wexford, we would come and ask town council if we determine that there's a need, and it starts with Jeff, it goes through Sean, we work with our chief financial officer and with me, we would ask town council for a budget amendment to cover those costs. And in this case, we would draw the debt funds down from the $13 million in fund balance.
Yeah, is that how the long pump station situation was dealt with?
It's how it will be dealt with after Tropical Storm Debbie. The pump station that was dealt with last year was dealt with it the same way, right? We had 3 pumps. They were refurbished when we purchased them. 2 were out. They were in the shop, as they call it, for some time. And we needed an emergency purchase and an emergency improvement. We found ourselves in that same situation when some of these pumps, forgive me for not explaining it as well as Jeff, but some of these pumps were just burning the midnight oil, and they were more worn out than we first assessed at the beginning of the fiscal. When we find out about those major, right, those major issues, we have an obligation to fix it. In my opinion, based upon the agreements, we have to come and ask town council if you would consider a budget amendment. That's how we'll deal with that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jeff, for the information thus far. I want to get just a little bit of clarity here. I understand that we'll have 26 agreements potentially after today. But Sean, you mentioned 32. Is that 32 more potential can come to us, or we can reach the number of 32?
So the way it's laid out, there's 22 today. These 4 will get to 26.
Yeah.
There's 4 more that have contacted us, actually maybe a 5th as of last week, that would be interested. Then beyond that, there were 28 additional. So I think you get to 58, or
Perfect.
I think 58 is, and then as I've talked more with Jeff, the projects that are currently under construction, once they're complete and receive their CFC, they could also apply for these agreements. So Bailey's Cove or other subdivisions that are currently under construction could add to that 58 when they're complete.
Okay, so I just want to get a little bit better understanding of the map. I've got it as far as the different shades are concerned, but what I'm curious of is the drainage right-of-ways, or what is being addressed in the agreements. Does that also apply to those that are what's being displayed here as our primary responsibilities?
Yes, when it comes to outside the private communities, where the roads are public, the DOT is responsible for maintaining the state roads, including the outfalls. Now I'm saying responsible for. We can talk a little bit more about that, and then the county is responsible for all the drainage systems that support draining the county road rights of way. And then again, the smallest footprint, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 8% of the roads, public roads in the town are owned by, public roads in the island, in the town are owned by the town. So it's not a very large footprint when it comes to that. But we are very proactive because we consider taking care of the community as a whole. There's been many cases over the years where we've just moved outside, just in the town proper to take care of deficiencies that may affect a county or a town right-of-way, just to take care of the problem. We do work with the county and the state to make sure that they correct their own, but sometimes we just need to move because the deficiency is ranked by us to be too critical for us to wait. So we're always, advocating on behalf of the town to make the county do what they're supposed to do with their roads, and the state the same.
And sort of a follow-up on one of Councilman Ames' questions. So about 13 million in fund balance, about 5 million being collected through the rate on a yearly basis. As far as the capital improvement side of this, not the maintenance side, well, I guess I would include the maintenance side in this question as well. Are there any other subsidies that are coming from other revenue sources to support stormwater, either capital improvements or maintenance?
So there have been times recently where some general fund money has used to support the utility. I think it was part of what was authorized last year when council authorized purchasing 2 of those new pumps that came into place and were installed at Lawton and Sea Pines. But generally, the stormwater utility is self-supporting, and that's our funding revenue source.
Okay. I'm not asking you to go into this now, but, as you're presenting to us at the workshop around resiliency, I think we need to also better understand the criteria that's being used for, priorities. And the reason that I'm bringing that up is because Councilman, Alfred brought up, emergency and the need for us to respond quickly. But I'm wanting to understand a little bit better what deems an emergency. I mean, obviously, the bigger PUD's emergency may be quite different from maybe one of the agreements that we're putting in front of us today as far as emergency is concerned, okay? So I think we need to understand that and understand where we are as far as funding that is available to respond to emergencies.
Yes.
At the end of the day, I think it's important to recognize that everyone is paying into this fee. I mean, no one's exempt from it. So there's an expectation from everyone that there's some type of return that happens, all right? And I think we're a bit off base at the moment. And it's no one's fault, it's just a reality. So as we dive into this a little deeper at workshop, I think that piece is gonna be critical. Because at the end of the day, we don't want the expenditures or the approved expenditures to necessarily be political. I think they need to be fair to everyone. And I think that's where we're trying to go here. But the information that surrounds the facts of the reality, I think needs to be in front of us. Make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
I appreciate that, yes.
Okay. Did you want to follow up, Mr. Stanford? Yes.
The chairman stole my thunder on that, but I was going to suggest that at the workshop, you present the list of the categories of priorities that you use for the system so that everyone understands that. I mean, things like if an area tends to flood, does that give it a higher ranking? Those sorts of things, not today, but at the workshop, I think will be useful to the full council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. Mr. Ames, yes.
I want to be clear, for staff's benefit. My questions were directed towards policy, not the staff. The staff has done an extraordinary job with this, stormwater utility. And Jeff, thank you for your leadership in that regard.
Thank you.
You good, Mr. Alfred?
Just want to thank you for that excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's take public comment, and then we'll bring it back to the dais, okay? Anyone from the public want to comment on this particular item? Anyone signed up? I'm sorry. Nobody signed up?
No, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Before Mr. Ames gives us a motion here, I wanted to echo the sentiments of the staff. I think we've come a long way, all right? This map sort of depicts that to a degree. We understand that this is, in some cases, a bouncing ball or a moving target because there's so many different entities that are involved in the process. I can remember, I don't know, probably about 10 years ago, the county came over and said, hey, let's get together and talk about this. And that didn't go very far. So I commend you all for having these conversations and bringing forth the data to us so that we can direct policy, as Mr. Ames has mentioned, so that we get to a better place.
I'd like to make a motion to forward the resolution authorizing the execution of standardized stormwater agreements for Broad Creek Landing, Paddocks on Jarvis Creek, Rebo Island, and Victoria Square to the full town council.
Second.
Good. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Next up, we will have a monthly financial report and presentation by Ms. Adriana Burnett. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing this morning?
Well, thank you.
So I want to start these meetings going forward with answering the questions that you had prior to this meeting. And if you can help me put the presentation up there, that would be great. I do want to commend Kelly Spinellas from our communications team. These beautiful pictures, they actually come from her. Isn't that pretty? Okay, so let's talk about the first question, and I think it was you, Mr. Alfred, that asked this question. Emergency fund. So one of the things that I do want to mention, I grew up in Miami. I had the opportunity of experiencing a few hurricanes and a few tropical storms. But I have never seen a group like the one we have here in Hilton Head, led by Thomas Dunn, how prepared we were during Tropical Storm Debbie. I was very impressed. I was very impressed with the staff members, everybody that was part of that whole emergency group. That was impressive. And when we're looking at these numbers here, it is amazing to me that a town like Hilton Head is prepared, not only having the staff, but also the liquidity to prepare for an emergency like a hurricane. So I want to start by talking about the $35 million that you see there. If we run that out, that number is $36 million. That is actually in our natural disaster fund, and it is liquid cash. No, it's not sitting in the account, not making any interest. It is actually invested, but it is liquid. We can actually sell the T-notes or the T-bills that we have, and that money is liquid. In addition to that, notice the $20 million, and this is an interesting thing here because actually the town council approved or imposed an 80% cap that we can actually issue bonds in case of emergency at a minimum of $20 million, and that's what that number represents. So if we add those two numbers together, we actually equal $59 million. Then in addition to that, one of the things that I think is even more impressive is about a year, 2 years ago, we had in our general fund reserve, we were reserving at a 35% ratio, and now it went up to 40%. So we actually have a reserve of $23 million, that is 40% of next year's general fund budget. So that's what that $23 million number represents. So again, we add the 23 to the 59, it gets us to the $79 million number that you see there. I mean, that is a lot of money, that is a lot of funding for emergencies. Of course, there's nothing that prepares for a hurricane, but it is great to see that not only we have a team here in town that is very well prepared, but we also have reserves and we have cash to be able to pay for any disaster that might come our way. I hope that gives you some relief. There's no relief for tropical storms of hurricanes, but at least we have a relief that we have this money, that we have people in town that are prepared, that we have the liquidity, that we have the reserves, and that we have the option of issuing bonds at a $20 million number.
Okay.
Okay, you have a smile, okay.
We're gonna pause on this portion. I want to make sure that we understand the numbers because the math is it's a little different than it's being displayed here. But I want to first of all thank Councilman Stanford for continuing to bring this question up. And this may be the last time that we have this discussion with Mr. Stanford on the dais, okay? But the point that I'm making is it's always good to have someone sort of tugging at you saying, don't forget. And Mr. Stanford, I really appreciate ever since I've joined council, you have always sort of beat on this drum to make sure. And mainly because we had the unpleasant experience of going through this, right? And we're definitely not looking to test our skills again, but being prepared for it is definitely important. So with that, Ms. Stephanie, further questions for Ms. Burnett?
Thank you for this information. It's very helpful. It gives a lot of comfort to know that we've got this kind of capacity. But the further question that I keep asking is, based upon rates of inflation and what we spent in Matthew, do we have a sufficient fund to cover those expenses, assuming that we have another storm like Matthew?
So it is my understanding during Matthew that it was about $57 million that we paid for Matthew. It is also probably about $47 million that we also received back from FEMA. So looking at these numbers, and again, I'm putting my financial hat on, we are in a very good shape with these numbers. Like I said, hurricanes are something that we cannot predict. It would be nice to have a crystal ball and say we have these hurricanes coming or not coming. But I think from a financial perspective, and keeping in mind that the 35 is invested, that we're making a very good return on that money. Keeping in mind too that our general fund, we have 40% reserved against our next year's budget in general fund. I think we are keeping up with inflation. Again, 2016, it is my understanding that was a hurricane, I think it was 2, considered a category 2. And considering that we got most of the money back from FEMA, and keeping all those into consideration, I think we are in a very good place with this money and the liquidity that we have.
Well, when you compare the $79 million to the 57, more or less, that was spent, I suspect that's keeping up with inflation very nicely. Hopefully, we don't have another storm
I
like
hope
that.
we don't, because
But,
I'm living here
hope
and I
doesn't do
refuse
it.
to have another one.
Financial planning
Yes.
does it, so I
Yes.
think the town is in good shape.
I
Thank
think
you.
it is too.
I have a question. Worst comes to worst, and 79 million isn't adequate. Do we have bonding capacity beyond the 20 million that you're showing here?
So you have to remember the $20 million is the minimum, Looking at all the bonds, I mean, we have general obligation bonds today. So if we look at the calculation, we have about potentially between 30 to 40 more million dollars that we can potentially issue in additional bonds if something were to happen.
Thank you.
With or without a vote. You said another 30 or 40 million of bonds.
Yes, so
with
that-
or without a vote.
Yeah, actually, it will be without the vote, yes. Yes, so that's really good. So let's assume that you decide to issue 30 more million dollars. That will take us to $109 million. That's a lot.
Yeah, a lot of money.
Yes, it's a lot of money.
Okay,
Any more questions on this topic?
I think we're good.
No?
Thank you.
So let's talk about financial update for fiscal year 2025. This update is for 2 months, so the month of July and August. And I'm going to give you actually a better number than the $13 million that I just threw out for stormwater. Actually, we started the year for stormwater with $14 million, $669,464. So all this are year beginning balances for our core funds. What you see on the next column is actually the year-to-date revenues. These are revenues that we have received, and they look a little low because normally our revenues that we receive here are usually we get them mostly on the third and fourth quarter of the year. I mean, property taxes is one of our largest revenue sources. And as you know, January 15 is when property taxes are due. So the number looks a little small. So it looks even smaller if you compare that against the expenditures that we have for the last 2 months. So remember, we haven't received a lot of the revenues. So most of the revenue comes from a tax, the 1%, the local a tax number that we get. And then there's a few other things that we also receive for the first 2 months of the year. So again, you add in all those, adding the revenues, subtracting the expenditures. As of the end of 8/31/24, these are the balances that we have. So if you look at the consolidated number, it is 217. Again, compared to the prior years, I'll say that we are doing really good. So let me show you even more. If you look at the budgets, so this is what you approve. Fiscal year budget approved, consolidated number was $167 million. So the year-to-date activity is those revenues minus those expenditures. This is the net activity for the first 2 months of the year. So we take that net activity out and the remaining balance is 151. Again, it's still the beginning of the year, so we still have a lot of room. So we're still within our budget, and this is the remaining funding of that budget that you approved. So what makes the general fund number? So the top uses of funds included a $4.7 million in personnel expenses and $3.4 million in operating expenses. So that's what makes that number. Sources of fund, again, we have about $398,000 in revenue that we got for our local aid tax. And we have $366,000 in interest earned. And then for the debt service fund, again, we had the top uses of funds included a $4.4 million in principal and interest bond payment that we paid. And the sources of funds included about $131,000 in interest earned again. So I just wanted to give you a high level, some of the top sources and uses of funds that represent the number where it says year-to-date net activity. Yes, questions?
I have a question on debt service. The revenue source for this particular line, what is that? Is the most of that the millage rate that we're charging for debt service, or are there other funding sources that are supporting this?
So we pay, as you know, we have the general obligation bonds that we have. We have the principal balance that we have right now is about $46 million. So we do pay potentially about 2.9 to potentially $3 million in bond payments per year for those general funds. We also have revenue also bonds as well. So all of that comes out of that debt service fund. So that number that you have there is the 4.236708 number. It's actually those payments, that's the net amount of those payments that we pay. We subsidize, a lot of the money comes from our general fund, and we transfer money every year to make sure that we are paying for our bonds and for our, what we owe for these general obligations.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We continue with the next slide. Again, look at the pretty picture. So this is something that is very interesting to me because reality is that we do have a big budget that we approved for fiscal year 25 for $74 million. However, there were projects that we started back in 24. And as you can see, the column on the left, the first column represents the unspent budget. We are not asking to carry forward all these unspent balances that we have for each of those programs. This is what I'm going to be presenting in October during our town council meeting as we're talking about budget amendments. So this is only the CIP portion here. So this is the proposed numbers that I will be talking about. But I wanted you to have some high-level overview of some of the conversations that we're going to have in October. So as it relates to going back to stormwater, due to tropical storm Debbie, there's 2 pumps in Wexford that we have to replace. And the total for those pumps is about $665,000. It is amazing how expensive these pumps are. So part of that 993 number that you see in the middle there, 665 represent the Wexford pumps. The remaining balance, which is about $327,000, actually that is a carry forward that we are carrying from the 24 to pay for the Lawton pump. So $993,000, 310 is what we are proposing in new budget, and 327 is what we're carrying forward for the Lawton pump. In addition to that, we have the $4.5 million that you see there for fire rescue. Those are the fire trucks that you have approved before, and we are carrying forward, we would like to carry forward from 24 to pay for the fire trucks and all the different equipment that we've been getting since June. So that's what that number is. So those two numbers added together equal about $5.4 million. In addition to that, we have land acquisition. We budgeted for 25, $250,000. Well, we purchased a building, we call it the PNC building, which is located at Fort Office Parkway, and that was $2,975,000. Okay, that's another number that we are asking for you as well to approve, or we will be asking town council to approve. So the total capital program is about $8.4 million. Again, we're not asking to carry forward the unspent amounts in 2024 as is referenced in the first column. We're only asking for those three items: stormwater, the fleet program, and the land acquisition. Questions on this?
Yeah, just one, I want to make sure that it's clear to the public as we're going through this, because the last column to the right says FY 2025 proposed revised budget.
That is correct. So we're moving from $74 million, which is the amount that you approved in June. We adding 8.4, so that increases the 74 by 8, and the new number is now $82.8 million that it is the revised and new budget for 25. And again, this is for CIP.
I'm a little confused about rolling forward and not rolling forward. In the past, we have been carrying these things forward, and it's been a little confusing looking at it. And so, but after saying that, I see the fleet program, $4.4 million. I understand we've already committed to that. Why was that not in the budget to start with?
Okay, so here's the thing. We signed an agreement, or you approved an agreement on amendment a few years back, and I can't recall the number, the year now. I think it was 2022, that we were going to replace fire trucks and all this equipment.
Right.
So we budgeted for that year because we were thinking that we were going to get all this equipment that year when things got approved. But then we realized after talking to the vendor that they were not going to be able to provide us with the equipment.
There was a delay in.
There was a delay in delivery, there's a delay in production, there's a delay in sourcing and supply chain. So we were not able to get that equipment at the time that we were expecting. So you approve a budget, then we didn't pay anything. So we've been carrying that amount year after year. And then the amount that we are carrying here is the 4.53 that we need from the prior year, again, that we need to continue paying for these fire trucks. If we don't carry that forward, that means we're not going to have the funds to be able to pay for those fire trucks and all that equipment that we're starting getting. So we're now getting 3 years later, actually 3 years later, we're starting getting that equipment starting in June. And we're supposed to finish the delivery, or the vendor is supposed to deliver that equipment at the end of our fiscal year. So we're asking to get that money be carried forward so we can pay for all these fire trucks and this equipment that is going to be delivered at the end.
I understand what you just said, and I understand the need for the fire equipment. Where I am confused is we know we have an obligation, we have a contract
Yes.
to pay this $4.4 million for the fire equipment. I'm wondering why that wasn't in the budget to start with.
Because we didn't know at this point, we didn't know when we were getting the equipment. So we didn't know, it's interesting, like when you are thinking of buying a car, I'm putting it simple like that. You're thinking of buying a car, but you really don't know when you're going to be able to buy the car or when you're going to get the car. In this case, we knew that we were wanting to buy all this equipment. We just didn't know when the equipment was going to be delivered to us. So we only budget enough thinking about this is all we're going to be getting this year. This is all we're going to be paying for this year. So it didn't make any sense to be able to pay, budget for $12 million when we didn't think we were going to get that $12 million in that 1 year when it was approved. In this case,
Yeah, I
we've been
think-
carrying the balances year after year. So now the $4 million hopefully will be finished, will be the last carry forward that we will have hopefully, because we will get all the equipment by the end of this fiscal year.
Thank you.
I don't know if that answered your question. I
I
can,
think it does. I think it
Okay.
does. Thank you.
Let's see if I can.
you
try
have
to-
something else, yes,
Try to
tell
help you a
me.
little bit. So we approved $7.3 million, which the fleet was included in the 2025 budget. I think what we're looking at as far as the amendment is concerned is just the unspent money from 2024. I think what makes it a little confusing is the FY 2025 proposed revised is going to be at 11.7. I guess to give us some comfort, and we'd like to know what that number is really going to end up being once everything is delivered.
So we paid, I know, and I can't remember the amount, I can get you that number. I know we paid in June before we closed the 24 number. We actually got 2 trucks in June. And we paid at that point, I think it was $2-something million, we paid at that point in June, some of that amount. Then the remaining we were supposed to get, or we're going to get by the end of this fiscal year. So hopefully that will finish the transaction as it relates to the fire trucks. Hopefully we don't have to wait another 3 years, and I don't think that's the case. Actually, we are in good shape as it relates to delivery of the trucks. I don't know if you had the opportunity of seeing any of the shiny trucks that we got so far, but I know Chief Chris is Blanket Chief is very excited about those trucks, but hopefully that will be it, and we don't have to carry forward any more unpaid amounts to for next year.
It's important to bring that out when you are presenting to us with the budget amendment.
Yes, okay, so again, I will try to get more information and better numbers and dates, so you can understand the transaction better.
Okay.
So the next thing that I have is actually, again, what I did here is actually have a chart that shows the $74 million that you approved. And I have the budget here by program. So you can see how much we have spent so far year to date by program. So altogether it's about 6.1. In addition to that, we have encumbered $7.5 million. So altogether it's about $14 million. So the remaining budget we have for CIP is $60.8 million, which is the number that you have on the last column. So hopefully this will give you visibility of the remaining budget numbers that you have by program and where we are as of the second month of the year.
Okay. Questions?
The term encumbrances is a little confusing to me. As a lawyer, an encumbrance is something that affects a title. But I think here we're talking about encumbrances means they're committed under a contract.
That's correct. So there is a contract and we have committed to pay X amount of money to the vendor or the contractor. Yes.
That'll
We have
be-
it.
Excuse me, that'll be worth explaining to council when the full budget is being presented, because other people may have the same question about encumbrances. I thought I understood it, now I do. Thank you.
Do you think it would be a good idea, and this is a question for the four of you, because being new and not being part of government, there's a lot of terminology that I have found, being encumbered being one of them, that I have found confusing. Do you think it will help, especially during our budget process, to be able to have a glossary of terms and be able, so we can define what things are? So CIP, not everybody knows what CIP is. We know it's Capital Improvement Program. So do you think it will make sense as part of our budget process to be able to have definitions and be able to have these abbreviations, spell them out, and define what they are.
It's an extraordinary idea.
Okay. Okay.
James, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm still trying to get a handle on what we had going on last year and what we anticipate going on this next year. Let's use road program, for instance. I presume we had obligations and contracts last year that we are still working on. They're not complete yet. And now we're having a new tranche of commitments going forward. And we haven't spent any of that money to speak of. So I'm trying to understand how we track all of this.
So last year, when we finished the year 24, you had unspent, or we have unspent for roadways, for instance, the example that you just used. We had $3.9 million of money that we didn't spend. That
But
means
those contracts are still in place going forward.
when I'm looking at these numbers, I am saying that that's it. No, there's nothing else that we need to pay out of the budget that we have for 24. Therefore, we're not carrying forward anything else for 25 as it relates to the roadway program. So when you look at all these numbers that are on column left, it says unspent budget, we actually had a remaining balance for pathways, so 3.8, roadways 3.9, park we have 7.1. So we are not carrying forward the amounts of the balances for those
Okay, another
programs.
question. Have we completed what we said we were going to complete in that year?
What do you think, sir?
Try not to jump in the way. This year's a little different. We projected, and I'm just going to use a round number, we projected that we would spend about $15 million more last year than we actually did. There were some issues there. There were some projections by the CIP program, but also not by them, but just an estimation and a projection of schedule. And so as we started setting our last year budget, keep in mind, Adriana and I were still talking on a virtual call and getting our budget together, our CIP team was projecting that they would spend those dollars. But when we really started to dive into how long it's taking for civil work, how long it's taking for survey work, how long it's taking for permitting work, what I used to call a land disturbance permit is now called a coastal zone consistency permit. It's taken a year. And so what we're saying now is when we were projecting to move those dollars forward, there's no sense putting them in the new fiscal year budget amendment. It's simply important that we just retire the funds for now. We put them back in our glossary of terms, what I would call a fund balance. And we're saying that we have enough funds planned and programmed for fiscal year 25. I'll also say right now, we have in the past, fire truck as an example, we've planned for roll forwards, right? We've planned for new money and we've planned for roll forward money. And that made up a budget, except for the unknowns. The unknowns of, hey, well, we didn't get to it. We still need those dollars to finalize the purchase of all the fire trucks. What we're saying is the fire trucks here are unique in that sense. We're saying that these other projects, beach, pathway, roads, parks, facilities, SWU, we're saying that we're not rolling those forwards, those roll forwards this year like we did years past because of schedule. And I'll admit, we under projected or over projected, I should say. Thank you. We over projected our spend, but we got caught up and learned a lot about how long things are taking. Keep in mind, we started building this budget in January.
Let me ask the question in another way. If we're talking about the roadway program, 3.9 million unspent budget, is that 3.9 million in terms of projects in the budget for 2025?
Yes.
Okay, that explains.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate your help. Not being here for a while, it helps to have Mr. Orlando here helping answer the questions, so thank you. One thing that I do want to mention, and I want to put a seed out there, and this is something that that I know Mark and I have been high level talking, and I want to get your opinion. It is hard to predict how much money we're going to spend on projects. I mean, especially it is expensive to get work done here on the island. A lot of these numbers, if we were not here on the island, probably these numbers would be a lot lower. So as we're thinking about CIP and as we're thinking about fiscal year 26 budgets, which is going to be in a few months, we're going to start thinking about fiscal year 26 numbers. So as we think about the CIP projects and these big numbers that we are putting together, maybe we need to be thinking, instead of thinking in terms of 12 months, maybe we need to be thinking in terms of long term. Because some of these projects are multi-year projects. So it doesn't make any sense to get something approved for 12 months when in reality, a project might take 3 years, it might take 5 years to complete. So as we're thinking about our budgets and how we put our budgets together for CIP, then maybe we need to be thinking a 5-year or a 3-year budget process for CIP. So we don't have this carry forward. So we don't have this confusion about, did we finish that project, yes or no? If we know that a project is going to take 3 or 5 years, then it would be easier for us to project that. It would be easier for us to be thinking about funding. How do we fund these projects?
I'm looking at you, so I can't really see the head nods and shaking. So I'm gonna pause for a moment because I think she's posing a valid question to us, just for thoughts, obviously, reactions to what she's proposing as a potential. Anything there, Ms. Talbot?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
To have in the budget only what we're going to spend in the next year and have information showing what's in 26, 27, 28, and so forth.
Okay, okay.
That's my personal.
I think that's a very practical and useful tool to come up with, say, a 3-year projection, so that we don't have this rollover thing going on. And I'm not saying there's anything improper about it, it's just a little confusing. And so the idea that you have may very well solve that. Let's try it.
Yeah, because I think it not only helps for budget purposes, it also, I think it can help our CIP team as well. And it also can help us with cash as we manage our cash better, because then we're going to understand, okay, year 1, we're going to be spending X amount of money, year 2, year 3. So it will help us project and fund these projects better than the way we're doing it today. Well, thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Any more questions before I move forward?
Okay.
So one of the things I mentioned to you, I think last time we were talking, that within my team, we created a new team called the CIP Finance Team. So some of the things that, and this is just a sample of one of the things that we're going to be doing. I do want to say one thing before I start with this. I want to say thank you to Sean Collin and his team, because these wonderful renderings and some of this construction in progress information came from him and his team. My focus on this is not to talk about the construction in progress, because if you were to ask me what kind of grass it is, I have no clue what kind of grass it is. I'm not an engineer or an architect, but I can tell you about numbers. So Islanders Beach Park is one of the projects that we selected to talk about. I heard that it has, it's a project that actually a lot of people have questions on. And it is my understanding that the design phase for this project has been completed. It is my understanding that we are now bidding the project. It is expected for the project to start in November of 2024, and it is expected to end construction in May of 2025. So when I'm looking at the numbers, the budget that you approve is $3,750,000. Of course, this is a project that hasn't really started, but we're already spending some money or encumbered some money. So for July and August, we have $225 of expenditure. We encumbered about $97.8 million so far. So this is the remaining balance that we have in our CIP. We have 3,651,950. So what I see happening with projects is for us in finance to start understanding where we are in a project. What phase are we in? Are we in the design phase? Are we in construction? How much is left that we have before we can finish and complete a project? So is this information the type of information that you think our community and you will make sense for us to talk about? And Mr. Stanford, you are shaking your head, so I'm assuming,
I'm shaking my head and nodding. I think this is a good approach to find these projects.
okay, good. Any questions about this specific
Where would
project?
this information be,
So one of the things that I know Sean and to some extent our finance team is looking at software right now. Right now, it would be a dashboard. It's a dashboard that we have online that would be updated, but we're looking for a better way of presenting this information that is not, it doesn't have a lot of manual input. It's something that can give us reporting. It's something that if you ask for a report for a specific project, we can give you that information. So we're looking for a better way of reporting things. For now, it is a dashboard that is an internal dashboard where you can go and look at the project and you can look at the information in a specific project. One thing that we're going to be adding is the financial component. So you can see how much money we have spent and how much money is remaining. Going forward, again, we're looking at a software that it can potentially give us that information and can actually pull what I call managerial reporting, where we can give you better reporting depending on the questions and the things that you or the community needs.
All right.
I do have a suggestion,
Yes, sir.
and that is that maybe highlighting whether a project is under contract or not. I think you said that Islanders Beach Park is out for bids now. And so we don't know whether those bids are going to come in higher or lower, but if we were under contract, we would know what we were going to spend.
Okay, so what you're saying again is you would like to know if a project is under contract?
Right.
Okay. Anything else that, okay, so let's think about the dashboard, let's think about a software. What other types of information you or our community would like to see in relation to these projects? Anything else?
I think you got the most important one for the community. Expected date to end.
The completion date, huh?
Yes.
This will be very sensitive if it's behind schedule.
Right, absolutely.
Okay.
but is it your intention that this financial information would be put in the CIP project file?
Yes, I would like for you and our community to be aware where we're spending, how we're spending the money. Especially if we approve a budget, I want us to understand how much we have spent of that budget, how much we have encumbered, and how much is remaining. Because I want us to make sure, my job is to make sure that we stay within budget.
I just wanted to make sure for the public's benefit that if they're interested in a project, they can go to the CIP facility.
And be able to
display and have
say,
this information there.
yes, that is the goal for our community members, if they're interested in a specific project, to go into that project and be able to get all this information. Yes, that is our goal.
Thank you.
So the next project I have here to show you is the Taylor Family Park. Again, design phase is completed, or will be completed, excuse me, as of 2/28/25. Permitting will be 10/24/25, so we're expecting construction in November of 2025, and completion is 9/2026. Budget approved was $2.9 million. Of course, we haven't spent any money, but we do have some encumbered expenses of $8,754. And then the remaining CIP balance is $2.9 million for this specific project. Questions on this project? Okay. The next one is the Patterson Family Park. Again, designed to be completed on March of 2025, permitting to be completed on November of 2025. Expected beginning construction will be December of 2025, and the construction end is October of 2026. Again, the budget approved was 2.7. There are no expenses year to date, and the encumbered amount is $9,000, $9,010, and the remaining CIP balance is 2.7. Then this is another one. This is the Beach City Road to Dillon Road. The construction started in September 11, 2024. The substantial completion is December 2024. So we started with a budget of $500,000. We have spent so far $20,524. We encumbered $211,582, and the remaining CIP balance is $267,894. I actually like this one, and not because it's less or more important than the other ones, because Jeff did such a great job educating me about pumps, and I learned a lot with this project. So this one is actually one that has been completed. The last pump was installed in September 4, 2024. So we just installed the last pump. And this one, the interesting thing with this is that the station was built in 1989. And this one protects property and roads in a 2,000-acre Lawton Basin. And they did a lot of work on this. They actually did a whole new control building, new generator, new electronic controls, 3 new pumps. When we started in fiscal year 20, so I'm looking at the budgets from fiscal year 20 to 24, you approved $2.9 million. The expenses as of the end of 2024 were $1.7 million. In 2025, we encumbered 198. Part of the carry forward that we're going to be asking for in October is going to be 327, and that will pay off the total project. And as you can see, if you add all those numbers together, 1.7, the 198, and the 327, adding all those numbers together will be below what was approved back in fiscal year 20.
So the contract amounts came in under the budget estimate.
Not only they came under the budget estimate, but it also shows that we did a great job negotiating those contracts as well. Yes.
And so when you have a carry forward like that and the project is completed, what happens to that money?
We pay the money once we get the invoice from the vendor.
You're projecting a carry forward of $327,000.
That's correct.
Let's assume that is in fact the balance that's left. Where does that money go? Does it go back to the budget for that particular department? Or does it go to the general fund? Where does it go?
So normally the stormwater fund, we reclass or we transfer money to our CIP fund, and then when we get the invoice, we pay the invoice. I'm not answering your question.
Let me see if I can help with the question here. So the 327 that we're looking at is not it's the actual balance left on.
It's the
what we negotiated
327.
as a contract, correct?
That's correct.
I think what Mr. Stanford is asking is, when you add up the 1.7, the 200K, the 327, we're less than 2.9. Where is that difference? And I'm assuming that it's in fund balance because we just won't do the transfer from one account to the other.
That's correct. And we do pay the money. I mean, every time we pay invoices, they come out of the general fund. That's how we pay invoices. But right now, for accounting purposes, we normally transfer the money from the stormwater fund to CIP fund. And then once that invoice is paid, which the remaining will be the 327,000 plus whatever is encumbered for 25. So those two numbers added together, that will be the invoice of the amount remaining to pay that vendor.
The, the questions that you're getting about this is not intended to be critical at all.
And I'm not
We've
taking
never
them.
seen this kind of presentation before, and I think it's very useful to see it project by project. So
Okay.
thank you for doing that.
Yes, and again, I'm not taking them as I'm learning. We're learning as we go. And what I'm trying to capture with this conversation is trying to understand how I can better present this information to you. Because it is new. It is something that I know you haven't seen before. And I want to make sure that instead of confusing you, I want to make sure that I'm giving you the information that you need so you understand what you have approved and what we're doing here. So if at any moment I'm presenting something that does not make sense or you would like to see a different way, please let me know. Because I want to, if you're confused, then there's a big chance too that our community is also potentially confused. So if there's anything that would facilitate the understanding, please let me know, because I want to make sure you understand. Because my job, the way I see it, is make sure that we have clarity on the numbers that we are presenting. Not only that they're correct, of course, but they are clear to follow and understand.
Thank you.
And then the last one, I know there's a lot of questions as it relates to the beach renourishment. Sean and his team, and I see Sean next to me here, he actually divided this project in 3 phases. Phase 1, June 25th through October 25th. Phase 2, September 2025 to May 2026, and phase 3 is to be determined. The estimated project cost for our beach renourishment is about $42 million. So again, this year we approved $16.5 million. We don't have any expenses year to date, but we have encumbered about $143,992. And then the remaining is $16,356,058. So from a financial perspective, my questions are, or the next steps that we have are, we need to obtain bids and we need to understand pricing. Because right now it's just an estimated number, but we need to know what are the real numbers. We also need to identify the sources of funding for this whole project. How are we going to pay for this project? I know we have 16.5 that was approved for the budget, but let's assume it is 42. Then we need to identify how are we going to pay for this project. One of the things that I mentioned before is, and especially now being AAA rating, one of the things that we have to be careful is not to utilize the remaining or all the money that we have cash to pay for this project. So one of the things that we have to do is an analysis of how do we fund this project? How do we pay for the remaining amount? Of course, that is going to require assessing the impact, education, getting feedback from not only you, but also our community, and obtaining approvals from town council for our sources of funding, either being cash, being debt, being whatever grants or whatever else we need to have to be able to pay if it's $42 million. Questions, comments? Anything else, Sean, that I need to mention?
I have a comment, if I might.
Yes, sir.
Somehow I thought we had bids on the beach renourishment. Not so?
No, Sean Colon, Assistant Town Manager. No, sir. We haven't received the permits yet. There's additional surveys that will be done this year with our consultant to finalize the project. And with that, we'll be able to go out to bid and get real numbers. We estimate based on the previous beach renourishment and the volume of sand that we're placing in the areas, additional groins in Pine Island. We have a pretty good idea that it's, we think in that $42 million range, but we won't know until we get the contract, the bids back once we go out.
I stand corrected. Thank you.
Sir.
Anything else from the dais? Before you leave, and before I open to public comment, thank you for sort of slowing down with the CIP. When we get into budget season and the town manager is starting to have his conversations with us about the entire budget, it is sort of overwhelming when you look at everything, okay? But this part is the real public investment, right? I think it's one that we sort of wrestle with because it's not a 1 year exercise. It is more drawn out. So just the ability to explain to the public where our investments are going. The pictures are nice as well, but I think just sort of the details along the way is something that we should continue moving forward. It really starts to give the council and the community a better understanding of where we are investing and what is value to us. So I encourage us to have this as part of the presentations moving forward. Okay. Yes, Mr. Ames.
Thank you. Adriana, I appreciate this tremendously, but I think it's even more important. I think the public will appreciate it, the access to this kind of information. It's absolutely clear to me, and I presume it will be clear to the public. So thank you very much in that effort. Appreciate it.
Thank you. One more question I do have. So there's different things that I would like to do with these FNA meetings. One of them be giving you a financial update. I would like to get from you also what you're hearing in the community in terms of what projects they will want to get more information on. Until we are live with our dashboard, then there might be a time delay on us giving the information that everybody needs. But one thing that I can do in these meetings is if there's any specific questions from the community or from you about a specific projects, then please let me know, because I would love to come back here and introduce and talk to you about projects and where we are and how much money we have spent on those projects.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Okay. Nothing else, Mr.
I do have another comment. I think what you have presented to us today about these projects is in the nature of an executive summary, which is very useful. I get lost in the weeds when I have this many numbers. And so I think the idea of including an executive summary on these projects could be useful if that's practical.
Okay?
Good, Ms. Alfred?
I can do that. Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this particular item?
Excuse me, no, sir.
No. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Seeing none, we will move on to public comment on non-agenda items. Has anyone signed up?
No, sir.
Okay. And now we will move on to adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you to the public.